The alien wilderness pulsed with a life of its own, its every sound and movement a reminder of how far Logan was from home. Towering, bioluminescent trees stretched skyward, their glowing tendrils swaying lazily in the humid breeze. The forest floor, carpeted with moss-like vegetation that glimmered faintly underfoot, seemed to shift subtly whenever he moved, as though the planet itself was aware of his presence. Logan hated it, hated the way this place made him feel small, fragile, and out of his depth. But he couldn't afford to let that fear show, not even to himself. Logan adjusted the strap of his pack, wincing as the weight dug into his shoulder. The pack held everything he had left, a few days' worth of rations, a survival knife dulled from overuse, a half-full canteen of purified water, and his rifle. A battered but reliable weapon he'd scavenged from the wreckage of his ship. It had saved his life more than once since his crash landing on this unforgiving planet. He paused to catch his breath beside a cluster of crystalline growth sprouting from the ground. The formations hummed softly, emitting a faint golden light that cast strange, flickering shadows across his face. Logan crouched, running a gloved hand along one of the crystals. They felt cool to the touch, almost wet, despite the oppressive heat. Everything here was alive in ways that defied his understanding. Even now he couldn't shake the feeling that the planet was watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. Shaking off the thought, Logan straightened and glanced up at the sky. It was a kaleidoscope of swirling purples and golds, a storm of colors that never stayed still for long. He checked the small device strapped to his wrist, a makeshift tracker he'd cobbled together from the ship's remains. It didn't work well, but it gave him a rough sense of direction, enough to keep him from wandering in circles. According to it, the river he'd spotted days ago wasn't far now. Water was the key to everything, drinking, cleaning, cooking. If he could find the river, he could survive a little longer. The undergrowth grew thicker as he moved, the air clinging to his skin like a second layer. Every few steps, Logan would stop, crouching low to listen. The forest was never silent. Strange calls echoed through the trees, some high and melodic, others guttural and threatening. He'd learned to ignore most of them, but now and then a sound would prick at his nerves. A predator's cry, distant but too close for comfort. As he pushed through the foliage, his mind drifted back to his crash. It was the last thing he ever expected, being hurled light years off course during what should have been a routine cargo run. The ship had gone down fast, its systems failing one by one as he scrambled to regain control. He'd blacked out before impact, waking up to find himself alone, stranded, and surrounded by blunt objects. As he planned to regain control, he'd blacked out before impact. Hit the water dripping from under him, last thing he ever expected, being hurled light years off course during what should have been a routine cargo run. The ship had gone down fast. It seemed to be the biggest crisis. Its sense everlasting. Logan shook his head, forcing the memory away. Dwelling on the past wouldn't help him now. He focused instead on the rhythm of his movements. Step, pause, scan. His boots crunched softly against the moss, and he kept his rifle at the ready, the familiar weight of it a small comfort. The sound of rushing water reached him before he saw it, a low, steady murmur that quickened his pace. He pushed through the last tangle of vines and finally emerged onto the riverbank. The sight before him almost made him forget his exhaustion. The river was a ribbon of crystal-clear water, its surface reflecting the shifting colors of the sky like a liquid mirror. Smooth, iridescent stones lined the banks, and strange, glowing plants swayed gently in the current. Logan knelt by the edge, his reflection distorted by the ripples as he cupped his hands and scooped up a mouthful of water. It was cold, and impossibly clean, a stark contrast to the mouthful of water. He leaned back on his heels, letting the moment of peace wash over him. For the first time in days, he felt a flicker of hope. The river meant life, and life meant he had a chance. But then something shifted. A presence, subtle yet undeniable, prickled at the edge of his awareness. Logan froze, his hand hovering over his rifle as he scanned the tree line. The forest was still alive with sound, but now it felt different. It was only then, as he turned back to the water, that he saw her. Kneeling at the river's edge, the alien woman moved with an unearthly grace, her every motion fluid and deliberate, as if guided by some unseen rhythm. Her skin, a bronze so deep it seemed to drink in the sunlight, shimmered faintly with an otherworldly sheen. Intricate patterns of luminous blue wove across her shoulders and arms, their light pulsing faintly, in harmony with something Logan could not see or hear. Long, jet-black hair cascaded down her back, catching the golden light in subtle ripples as she dipped her hands into the river. Logan felt as though he were intruding on something sacred. The way she moved, her tall Amazonian frame, both powerful and delicate, commanded reverence. She was naked, but there was nothing vulnerable in her bearing. Her nudity was not a state of exposure, but an assertion of authority over her environment. Every gesture, cupping the water to her face, brushing her hair from her glowing patterns, felt ceremonial, as if she were in communion with the river itself. He tried to tear his eyes away, tried to focus on the familiar dangers of this world, the predators that stalked unseen, the toxic plants that could kill in minutes. But his gaze kept returning to her, drawn by a pull he couldn't explain. Awe and fear warred within him, his survivalist instincts urging him to retreat, yet curiosity rooted him in place. The sight of her was unlike anything he had seen, a stark reminder of how far he was from Earth and how utterly alone he was. Then she froze. Logan's heart skipped as her head tilted ever so slightly, her movements so precise they seemed mechanical. Her ebony hair shifted, revealing the sharp angle of her jaw and the subtle point of one ear. She stayed like that for an agonizing moment, her face turned away from him, but her body taut, alert. Logan's breath caught in his throat as his mind raced. Did she hear me? Did she smell me? He remained utterly still, the damp earth beneath him cool against his palms. His heart hammered in his chest, loud enough it seemed to echo across the river. Slowly, she turned her head toward him, and that was when he saw her eyes. They shimmered like living opals, their colors shifting with hypnotic fluidity, iridescent blues, greens, and fiery ambers swirling in an endless dance. Her gaze seemed to pierce through the foliage, meeting his with a startling intensity that pinned him in place. Logan felt a chill run down his spine, his body betraying him with a faint tremor. He couldn't tell if she truly saw him or merely sensed his presence, but her gaze was unrelenting, burning with an intelligence that was as alien as it was undeniable. A sharp snap echoed in the stillness, a twig breaking beneath Logan's weight as he shifted involuntarily. The sound might as well have been a gunshot in the hushed jungle. Her eyes narrowed, and her bioluminescent markings flared briefly, their glow deepening to a vibrant blue. The air between them seemed to thrum with tension as she rose to her full height, her movements slow and deliberate, as though to minimize any threat she might perceive or present. Logan finally moved, stepping back cautiously, his every nerve screaming for him to run. But her presence held him fast, like prey caught in the gaze of an apex predator. Her height dwarfed his. She was nearly 7 feet tall, her long limbs corded with sinewy strength. Her bare feet made no sound as she stepped closer to the water's edge, her head tilting again as she regarded him. Then she emitted a sound, a low, melodic hum that resonated in the air, deep and throbbing like a distant storm. Logan froze, his mind scrambling to process the sound. Was it a warning? A greeting? He tightened his grip on his spear but made no other move, unsure whether aggression would escalate the fragile balance of this moment. The hum faded, replaced by an unnerving silence as her gaze bore into him. She stepped forward, crossing the river in 2 graceful strides. The water seemed to part for her, rippling gently as if in deference. Now she was close enough that he could see the subtle texture of her skin, the faint shimmer of bronze overlaid with tiny, scale-like ridges. She was studying him, her opalescent eyes darting over his face and body, taking in his every detail. Logan felt exposed, stripped of the fragile confidence he'd clung to since his arrival on this alien world. His fingers tightened on the spear as she raised one hand, her long fingers tipped with sharp, obsidian-like claws. She extended her arm toward him, her palm open and inviting, though her expression remained inscrutable. Logan hesitated, his breath quickening as he stared at the outstretched hand. It was a gesture so universal, so disarmingly human, that it disarmed him entirely. Against his better judgment, he loosened his grip on the spear and reached out. His fingers brushed hers, and in that instant a spark jolted through him, not painful, but electric and alive, like the charge in the air before a thunderstorm. Her lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile, and she spoke soft, lilting words that were entirely alien, yet carried an undeniable weight of intent. Logan could not understand her, but he didn't need to. The meaning was clear. She wanted him to follow. For a long moment he stood there, torn between the primal urge to flee and the strange pull of her presence. Finally, as the jungle's shadows lengthened and the golden light dimmed, Logan stepped forward, his spear forgotten. Whatever lay ahead, he could not turn away. Not now. Not from her. The path Kael'ra led him down was no path at all. It twisted and wound through an alien jungle teeming with life, both wondrous and unnerving. Plants with translucent leaves exhaled faint mists that glowed under the strange, swirling sky. Towering trees with trunks like spiraled glass stretched endlessly upward, their canopies so dense it filtered sunlight into streams of shimmering purple and gold. The air was thick and humid, rich with the sense of shimmering purple and gold. The air was thick and humid, rich with a sense of shimmering purple and gold. Logan followed Kael'ra in silence, each step a mixture of hesitance and resolve. She moved ahead of him with a predator's ease, her long legs gliding over uneven terrain, her bioluminescent markings pulsing softly. Every so often she glanced back, her opalescent eyes briefly meeting his, as if ensuring he was still there. The intensity of her gaze left Logan both comforted and unnerved, a reminder that he was a guest, or perhaps prey, in her domain. The silence between them was heavy but not hostile. Logan could feel the weight of unspoken communication in her every movement, the way her head tilted at certain sounds, or how she paused at intervals, pressing her palm to the ground. She was attuned to this world in a way he could barely comprehend, and he found himself trying to mimic her, stepping lightly, listening intently to the rustle of leaves and distant calls of alien creatures. After what felt like hours, they reached a clearing, and Logan's breath caught in his throat. Rising before him was a colossal, tree-like structure, its trunk shimmering with veins of light that pulsed in rhythmic patterns, almost like a heartbeat. Its bark was a mixture of smooth bronze and crystalline textures, and its roots fanned outward in sprawling arches, forming natural alcoves where strange flora grew in vivid clusters of green, violet, and blue. The air here was warmer, charged with an energy that prickled at Logan's skin. Kayla stopped and turned to face him, her expression unreadable. She raised a hand, gesturing for him to sit on one of the wide roots. Logan hesitated, his instincts screaming to keep moving, to stay alert, but the quiet authority in her gaze made him comply. He lowered himself onto the root, the surface unexpectedly warm beneath him. Kelra moved toward a hollow in the tree, retrieving a gourd-like object that glowed faintly from within. She returned and held it out to him. Logan eyed the liquid inside, luminescent and viscous, like molten moonlight. His throat tightened as his survival instincts flared. Was it safe? Was she testing him? Kayla tilted her head, her lips parting in a series of soft, melodic sounds that could have been words or something else entirely. Her tone was patient, her movements unthreatening. Logan decided to trust her, if only for now. He took the gourd, sniffed its contents, and took a cautious sip. The liquid was cool and shockingly refreshing, flooding his body with warmth that banished the lingering ache of exhaustion. Logan exhaled sharply, his tension easing despite himself. Cairo watched him closely, her glowing patterns dimming slightly, as if satisfied. Then she pointed to herself, placing a hand over her chest. "Kayla," she said slowly, her voice low and resonant. Her eyes locked onto his, waiting. "Kayla," Logan repeated, his voice hoarse and hesitant. She nodded, a flicker of approval crossing her face. He gestured to himself. "Logan." "Logan," she echoed, the syllables clumsy on her tongue, but unmistakable. Her expression softened. "Just a little." And she touched her forehead with 2 fingers, as though committing his name to memory. The next hour passed in a strange dance of gestures and sounds, each of them striving to bridge the chasm of their differences. Logan pointed at objects, rocks, plants, the distant sky, and Kaelra responded with words he couldn't begin to replicate. When she spoke, her tone carried the weight of a story, as though the names of things were not just labels, but pieces of something greater. In turn, he attempted to explain his own origins, drawing crude shapes in the dirt, a circle for the sun, a jagged line for the mountains, a stick figure with arms reaching upward. Kaelra watched intently, her glowing patterns pulsing faintly as if responding to her thoughts. She didn't interrupt, but her tilted head and narrowed eyes made it clear she was processing his every move. At one point, Kayla leaned forward, brushing her fingers over the drawing of the stick figure. Her touch was careful, almost reverent. She raised her hand to the sky, gesturing to the swirling purple and gold expanse above them, then touched her chest again. Logan's heart thudded as he realized she was asking where he had come from. He pointed upward to the sky. "There," he said simply. Kaela's eyes widened slightly, her bioluminescent markings flaring brighter for a brief moment. She repeated the gesture, pointing to the sky and then to him, her tone carrying an edge of disbelief. Logan nodded, and she sat back, her expression thoughtful. As the strange twilight deepened, Kaera stood and gestured for Logan to follow once more. She led him to a smaller alcove beneath the massive tree, where soft, moss-like vegetation grew in thick patches. She motioned for him to sit, then withdrew to her own space, curling her long limbs into a seated position that seemed almost meditative. Logan lay back in the moss, exhaustion finally overtaking him. The air was filled with a gentle hum, as if the tree itself were alive and breathing. He glanced at Kayla, who sat with her eyes closed, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing faintly in time with the tree's rhythm. As sleep crept over him, Logan felt an unexpected sense of calm. For the first time since his arrival on this alien world, he wasn't entirely alone. The stillness of the jungle was a lie, a fragile facade masking the constant churn of life and death beneath its surface. Logan awoke to this realization, his senses stirring as the humid air buzzed faintly with unseen energy. Kaelra was already up, crouched a few feet away as she examined a patch of glowing vines that clung to one of the sanctuary tree's massive roots. The morning light filtering through the canopy painted her bronze skin in muted golds, her bioluminescent markings faint, as if conserving their glow for the hours ahead. Logan sat up slowly, his muscles stiff but rested. The moss beneath him had provided a surprisingly soft bed, though the alien world's perpetual humidity left him feeling sticky and uncomfortable. Kayla turned her head slightly at the sound of his movement, her opalescent eyes meeting his for a brief moment, before she stood with fluid grace. She gestured toward him, her sharp-clawed fingers sweeping toward the edge of the clearing. Logan squinted, following her line of sight to a patch of dense undergrowth. It was laden with small, bulbous fruits that glowed faintly. Her voice, a series of low melodic hums, rose as she gestured again. Logan didn't need to understand the words to grasp her intent. Food. He stood and followed her to the thicket, his eyes scanning their surroundings for danger. Though the jungle seemed calm, its stillness carried a tension he couldn't shake. As Kaelra reached for one of the fruits, Logan noticed her movements were more deliberate than before, her body coiled like a spring, ready to act. She plucked a fruit and held it out to him, her expression neutral. Logan hesitated. The fruit's glow was faint, but it pulsed rhythmically, as if alive. He glanced at Kayla, who raised her other hand to her mouth and mimicked eating, her sharp teeth flashing briefly. Trusting her guidance, Logan took a cautious bite. The fruit's flesh was cool and tangy, its juices spreading warmth through his body. It was sustenance, alien, yes, but nourishing. Before Logan could take another bite, the jungle's calm shattered. A deep guttural roar reverberated through the air, sending a flock of winged creatures screeching into the sky. The sound was close, too close. Logan froze, his heart hammering as Kaelra's entire body tensed. Her markings flared bright blue, the light washing over her bronze skin as she turned toward the source of the sound. The underbrush exploded in a blur of movement. A hulking creature emerged, its 6 limbs carrying a massive, armored body covered in chitinous plates. Its eyes, glowing a venomous yellow, fixed on them with a predatory intensity. Jagged mandibles clicked rhythmically as it released another ear-splitting roar, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Logan's survival instincts screamed at him to run, but his body refused to move. The creature towered over them, its form both grotesque and mesmerizing. Its long, spiked tail lashed through the air, slicing through vines and scattering fragments of glowing flora. Kayla reacted first. She let out a sharp, resonant cry, a sound so fierce and commanding that even the predator paused. Her body moved with blinding speed as she stepped in front of Logan, her claws extended, her bioluminescent patterns flaring brighter with every passing second. She crouched low, her eyes locked on the creature, every muscle in her body poised to strike. The beast lunged. Kayla met its charge with a ferocity that took Logan's breath away. She sidestepped its massive claws and slashed at its flank, her claws carving deep gashes into the chitin. The creature roared in fury, whipping its tail toward her, but Kayla leapt aside, her movements impossibly fast and precise. She struck again, this time aiming for its vulnerable joints, but the beast's thick armor deflected her blows. Logan finally broke free from his paralysis. His hands scrambled for his spear, the crude weapon feeling pitifully inadequate against such a monstrosity. Still, he couldn't stand idly by. Kyra was holding her own, but the predator's sheer size and strength were wearing her down. Its claws slashed through the air, forcing her to retreat, and the claws grew louder, shaking the ground beneath them. The creature lunged again, this time pinning Kayla against the trunk of the sanctuary tree. Its mandibles snapped inches from her face, and for the first time, Logan saw her falter. She struggled against its weight, her glowing patterns dimming as she fought to free herself. Adrenaline surged through Logan. He gripped the spear tightly, his mind racing. He knew he had one shot, and it had to count. Steeling himself, he charged forward, aiming for the exposed joint between the creature's chitinous plates. With a desperate cry, he drove the spear into its side. The beast screeched in pain, rearing back and releasing Kayla. Its yellow eyes locked onto Logan, and for a terrifying moment he thought he'd made a fatal mistake. But Kayla took advantage of the distraction. She leapt onto the creature's back, her claws finding purchase between its armor. With a guttural snarl, she drove her hand into the base of its skull, piercing through its protective plating. The creature convulsed violently, its roars fading into a gurgling whimper. Kayla withdrew her claws, ichor dripping from her fingers as the beast collapsed in a lifeless heap. The jungle fell silent, save for Logan's ragged breathing. Kayla slid off the creature's back, her shoulders heaving as she turned to face Logan. Her bioluminescent markings flickered faintly, her exhaustion evident. She approached him slowly, her expression unreadable. Logan tensed, unsure of what to expect, but she raised a hand and placed it over his chest. Her touch was firm yet gentle, her iridescent eyes searching his. For a moment, neither of them spoke or moved. The silent bond they'd been forming had shifted into something deeper, forged in the crucible of shared danger. Logan felt his pulse slow as Kayla's markings began to glow brighter, the soft blue light bathing them both. Kayla stepped back, her expression softening. She gestured toward the creature's body, then to the jungle beyond. Logan understood. There would be more predators, more dangers. They would need to remain vigilant. As they began to move again, Logan felt a flicker of something new. Hope. For the first time, he wasn't just a survivor in a hostile world. He was an ally to someone who understood it, someone who could teach him not just how to endure, but how to live. The jungle was quieter now, though the tension in the air remained like a phantom presence. Logan's body ached from the ordeal with the predator, but the adrenaline coursing through his veins dulled the pain. He followed Kayla through the undergrowth, the towering bioluminescent trees above casting faint blue and green shadows. Her movements were slower now, deliberate and measured, though her eyes never stopped scanning the surrounding jungle. Her markings pulsed faintly, their brightness subdued as if conserving her energy. Logan clutched his crude spear tighter, its stone tip stained with dark ichor. His breath came in shallow bursts, his mind replaying the battle over and over. The sight of Kyra pinned against the sanctuary tree, her strength nearly overwhelmed, haunted him. Yet, so too did the moment when her claws pierced the predator's skull, her ferocity a terrifying reminder of her strength. Kyla paused suddenly, her head tilting as she listened to the forest. Logan stopped behind her, his heart racing as he scanned the underbrush for movement. But there was nothing, only the faint hum of distant insects and the whisper of the wind through the alien trees. Kyla turned her head slightly, gesturing for him to follow with a subtle flick of her hand, her iridescent eyes calm but watchful. They arrived at another clearing smaller than the one surrounding the sanctuary tree. A shallow pool of crystal-clear water lay at its center, fed by a thin stream that trickled over smooth, glass-like stones. Kyla approached the water's edge and knelt, her elongated limbs folding with a grace that Logan could only envy. She dipped her fingers into the pool, her movements slow and deliberate, as if the water itself were sacred. Logan watched her for a moment before kneeling on the opposite side of the pool. The water glimmered faintly, its surface mirroring the glowing foliage above. He cupped his hands and drank cautiously. The water was cool and tasted faintly sweet, quenching a thirst he hadn't realized had been growing. When he glanced up, he found Kyra watching him. Her gaze was intense, her iridescent eyes studying his face as if searching for something unspoken. Logan shifted uncomfortably, the silence between them heavy. Finally, Kyra raised a hand, gesturing to the pool, and then to the trees around them. Her voice rose softly, her melodic tones flowing like the stream that fed the water. Logan shook his head, frowning. "I don't understand," he muttered, though he knew the words were useless to her. He gestured helplessly to himself and then to her. "I can dit. We don't speak the same language." Kyra tilted her head, her lips pressing into a faint line. She leaned forward, touching the ground between them with her clawed fingers. Her markings flared slightly, the soft blue glow illuminating her bronze skin. She pointed to herself. "Kyra," then to him. "Logan." He nodded. "Yes, I know that part." She smiled faintly, an expression that seemed equal parts amused and exasperated, then gestured again, this time pointing to the trees. Her tone shifted, softening, and she made a sweeping motion with her hand, as if encompassing the entire jungle. Logan frowned, watching her closely. She seemed different, less imposing. Her movements, though deliberate, felt more like a teacher instructing a stubborn pupil than a warrior addressing a stranger. Finally, she extended her hand toward him, palm up, waiting. Logan hesitated. Her clawed fingers, dark and sharp, were a reminder of her strength of the predator she had felled with those same hands. But her expression was patient, her glowing patterns pulsing steadily, almost reassuringly. Slowly, he reached out and placed his hand in hers. The moment their skin touched, Logan felt it again, a jolt of something electric, alive, as if the very air around them responded to the connection. Kyra closed her fingers around his hand and pulled him gently to his feet. She led him toward a cluster of strange plants growing near the pool, their leaves translucent and veined with shimmering light. Kyra crouched beside one of the plants, her movements slow and deliberate as she plucked a single leaf. She held it up to Logan, her iridescent eyes meeting his as she murmured something in her melodic tongue. Then she pressed the leaf to a shallow cut on her forearm. Logan watched as the cut began to heal almost instantly, the edges knitting together as if by magic. She held out another leaf, this one for him. Logan hesitated, then took it and examined it closely. The leaf felt soft and cool to the touch, its faint glow pulsing gently against his skin. He glanced at Kyra, who gestured for him to mimic her actions. Tentatively, Logan pressed the leaf to a scrape on his hand. He gasped as a soothing warmth spread through his skin, the scrape fading within moments. Kyra nodded, satisfaction flickering across her face. She began gathering more of the leaves, gesturing for Logan to do the same. Together they worked in silence, the faint sound of the stream and the rustling of leaves filling the clearing. When their task was done, Kyra sat beside the pool, her glowing patterns dimming slightly, as if signaling her fatigue. Logan sat across from her, the bundle of leaves resting in his lap. The silence between them felt different now, less strained, more companionable. He glanced at her, his mind racing with questions he couldn't yet ask. Where had she come from? Was she alone like him? Did she know a way off this planet? Kyra met his gaze, her expression softening. She raised a hand, her fingers brushing against his forehead briefly, then tapped her own chest. Logan frowned, unsure what she meant, but the gesture felt oddly comforting. As the light of the jungle began to fade, the soft glow of the plants and Kyra's markings illuminated the clearing. Logan felt an unexpected sense of peace settling over him. The jungle was still dangerous, its mysteries vast and unknowable, but for the first time since his crash, he felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't alone. Kyra leaned back, her gaze lifting to the alien sky. Logan followed her lead, staring up at the swirling purples and golds above. They were two beings from entirely different worlds, bound together by necessity and an unspoken understanding. Whatever lay ahead, Logan knew one thing for certain: they would face it together. Logan trudged through the jungle, the dim light of the alien world casting long, fractured shadows across the ground. His steps were heavy, his chest tight, as if leaving Kyra behind had cost him more than he could bear. He'd barely gone a mile, but already he felt the crushing weight of her absence, the silent void where her presence had been her steady gaze, her soft hums, the glow of her markings that seemed to light even the darkest corners of this hostile world. He paused near a fallen log, leaning against it to catch his breath, though it wasn't exhaustion that slowed him. It was hair. The memory of her touch lingered on his skin like an unspoken promise. Her eyes filled with something he couldn't put into words, and the way she had let him go, with no argument but an ocean of feeling. The jungle buzzed faintly, its constant hum now feeling oppressive rather than alive. Logan turned his gaze to the sky, the swirling purple and gold seeming further away than ever. He gripped his spear tightly, his knuckles whitening as he muttered to himself, "You ga doing the right thing. You have to leave. You have to." But even as he said the words, they felt hollow. The faint sound of movement behind him snapped Logan out of his thoughts. He spun, his spear raised, his heart pounding. For a moment he thought it was another predator, the jungle sending one more challenge to break him. But then, through the faint glow of bioluminescent plants, Kyra emerged. She stood tall and still, her bronze skin catching the faint light like polished metal, her glowing markings pulsing softly. Her face was unreadable, her gaze locked on him, as if she were deciding what to say or what to do. Logan's breath caught in his throat. "Kyra," he whispered, lowering his spear. "What are you?" Before he could finish, she crossed the space between them in long, deliberate strides. Logan barely had time to react before her hands were on him, firm but gentle as she gripped his shoulders and pulled him toward her. The force of her touch sent a wave of heat coursing through him, and he froze, stunned by the intensity in her eyes. She spoke, her voice low and insistent, her melodic tones carrying a gravity that made his pulse quicken. Though Logan still couldn't understand her words, their meaning was unmistakable. She pressed her forehead to his, her bioluminescent markings flaring brighter as she closed her eyes. Logan's mind raced. "Kyra, I don't it wrong." She silenced him with a finger to his lips, her touch gentle but commanding. Her other hand moved to his chest, resting over his heart, her claws grazing his skin through the fabric of his shirt. Her gaze bore into his, filled with something raw and unguarded. Kyra's markings flared again, the blue light illuminating both of them as she took his hand and placed it over her chest, directly where her heart beat in a steady, rhythmic pulse. Logan could feel it strong and alive, a mirror to the pounding of his own heart. "You feel it," she murmured softly, her voice trembling slightly, as though forming the words cost her more than he could know. Then, with a halting effort, she added, "Logan, Kyra." His breath caught. The words, clumsy and broken, were unmistakably clear. She had learned them for him, to say the one thing that mattered most. "Kyra," Logan whispered, his voice barely audible. She nodded fiercely, her markings flaring even brighter. Her hand moved from his chest to cup his face, her thumb brushing his cheek with a tenderness that sent a shiver down his spine. Her lips parted as if to speak again, but instead, she closed the distance between them, her forehead resting against his once more. "Kyra," Logan treed again, his voice breaking. You don't have to do this. You don't have to come with me. It is dangerous. I don't even know if I'll make it." Her lips curved into a faint, determined smile. She raised her other hand, touching his lips briefly before gesturing to the jungle around them, then pointing upward to the endless sky. Finally, she touched her chest and then his, as if to say, "Where you go, I go." Logan felt his resolve shatter. Every reason he'd clung to for leaving, every logical argument crumbled beneath the weight of her words, her touch, her unwavering determination. He reached up, his fingers brushing hers as he pressed her hand against his chest, his voice hoarse. "I don't deserve this," he murmured. "I don't deserve you." Kyra tilted her head, her markings dimming slightly as her expression softened. She leaned closer, her voice a whisper now, her words foreign but laced with something unmistakable. Trust. Connection. Love. Logan exhaled shakily, his forehead still resting against hers. He reached up and gently cupped her face, his thumb brushing the edge of her glowing markings. "You dear?" "Incredible," he said softly. "I don't know how this will end, Kyra, but if you dare with me," he trailed off, unable to finish. She responded by wrapping her arms around him, her embrace firm yet tender. Her tall, powerful frame enveloped him, and for the first time in weeks, Logan felt truly safe. He closed his eyes, letting himself sink into the moment, the weight of his doubts and fears lifting as her warmth surrounded him. When she pulled back, her gaze was steady, her expression resolute. She gestured upward again to the sky, her markings glowing brighter as she took his hand. This time, Logan didn't hesitate. He laced his fingers with hers, the connection feeling as natural as breathing. "Together," he said, his voice steady. Kyra nodded, her eyes shimmering with a mixture of relief and determination. With their hands entwined, they turned toward the jungle. The path ahead was uncertain, but Logan no longer felt the crushing weight of solitude. Whatever lay beyond the alien trees, whatever dangers awaited in the endless expanse of stars, he knew one thing for certain: Kyra would be by his side. And for the first time, that was enough.